Hey guys, I'm Aaron from Geeky Development and welcome to part 2 of our free tvOS crash course. Now in part 1 we created the foundations of our application. We got our UI collection view all set up and it's now displaying all of our supercars within the gallery. Next we're going to look at selecting one of the cells, selecting one of the cars in the gallery and pushing to a detail view. Once the detail view then loads up, it's going to populate an image view with the car that we selected and all the labels with its own individual stats for that particular car. So with whatever car we select, the stats and the images will change dynamically with our selection. So let's jump straight into part 2 and continue our crash course. Okay then, so continuing from where we left off in the last part of our crash course, we had the ability to now navigate between all the different cells which are displaying the different cars within our collection view. So we now want the ability to, when we select one of them, as I press enter there, as you can see, either on the keyboard there, if I did it on the controller, there you go. We want the ability to then push to a detail view to display more about this car, more in depth, more details. Now to do this, we're going to jump into our project now, and we need to add in a Uiviewcontroller, which is going to be used for our detail view. So I'll just quickly slide over to the right here. I'll zoom out so we can see the view. There we go, just move it there. Scroll to the top and add in a simple view controller. There we go. So we place that in, and what we need to do now, as you can see, is thrown up an error, and this error just basically means that there's no way we can actually get to this new view. There's no connection created. So within our cell here, as you can see there, we're going to right click it and drag it to the file's owner of our view controller, the detail view that we just added in. By doing that, we're then going to create a segue of show. So what that does then, it creates a link that you can see there between the two views, and that's only able to be kind of switched to our detail view if we select the cell. Now it's down to us what happens when we select each individual cells, but we'll come on to that later when we come to code it. The first thing we need to do is make sure that once we're in our view controller, our detail view, that we can handle it and add stuff in. So we need to create a class that controls this new view controller. So within our project, just like we've done in the last part of our crash course where we created the classes for our collection view, we're going to right click and then go to new file. Select a Cocoa Touch class and make sure it's a subclass of, this time, a Uiviewcontroller. And I'll simply rename it Detail View Controller and then press next and create that into our project. There we go, I drag and drop it underneath our collection view and then jump back into our main.storyboard where we'll select the file's owner of this new view and then go to the identity inspector and add that new class to this new view. There we go, we got it in. Okay then, so we've got that all set up, and then what we're going to do now is add in an image view into this detail view. So when we select a cell, it's going to bring the image in that cell over and display that in the image view of our detail view. So what we're going to do then is quickly find an image view and then drag and drop that in. I'll make it a little bit bigger so you can see it in greater detail when it comes in, and I'll just quickly center it there. So within the file's owner here, I'm going to bring up the assistant editor. And again, if you're not pre-selected on the correct class, then simply go to manual and then cut through until you find your actual detail view controller. I'm going to space out now the little outlet section and then drag and drop or control click or right click our image view and create it as an outlet. So I'll call it our detail image view. There we go there, and connect that up. We've created an outlet for it. There you go. We're then going to close our assistant editor. So we now have that all simply set up. We've created an outlet for our image view, so we have the ability to, when we select a cell, bring it over and display it in our image view. Now that does sound quite simple, but it's not that simple. What we need to do is create an additional variable. We need to create a string also within the detail view. Now, the reason we're going to create a string within our detail view is because we're not going to get the image and display it within our image view. It's not as simple as that. What we need to do is bring and convert the image within our cell into the file's name of it and display that within our string, and then get our string to display it within the detail image view. Now that sounds a little bit more complicated, but again, that's a pretty simple process. So back within our Uiviewcontroller.swift, just underneath where we added in our detail image, we're going to create a variable, and we'll call this our sent data, and that's going to be linked to a string. And we're creating an exclamation mark there because we're going to be converting the data over. And all this variable does now, all it's going to do is handle the information from the cell we selected. Because we're going to be pressing different cells to bring over different informations at any given time, we just want the image to be converted into a string to be handled within the sent data variable. And then in this new view, our detail view controller then displays the file name from the sent data. Again, it can become a little bit confusing, but it'll become very clear and simple when we code the rest. So let's do it. Let's jump into our collection view controller.swift. Now, we created a segue between the two views. And if we scroll down now, where you can see here, UI storyboard segue, prepare for segue, we're going to remove the comment in code there to reveal it. I'll space it out. Now, what this does is performs an action when we prepare into segue, which is how we're going to be switching to the detail view. Now, when we prepare to segue, we need to make sure that we get in the right one, because we could add multiple segues to the view. So how do we know that the one that we switch using the cell is the right one? Now, granted, we've only got one in, so it's not really going to matter, but we need to future-proof ourselves for if we have multiple segues. So before we continue, we're going to jump back into our main.storyboard. Now, again, between the two views, we created this segue. Now, this segue, very much like how we added to the cell of our collection view, also needs to have an identifier, which I'll simply call this one show detail. There we go. So if I had two segues in and I created code for when we prepare to segue to bring the image view over, that will happen on both segues. But if I create an identifier on a segue and say if the segue identifier equals show detail, then bring the image over, which means the only time that would happen is if I use the segue with an identifier equaling show detail. So again, we can then single out different segues, which again is a great feature and enables us to control the code within it. So back within our collection view now, we're going to create an if statement. So if our segue dot identifier is equal to the string of show detail, then perform this action. Again, we're just covering ourselves if we added in an additional segue in the future. We don't want both segues to do the same thing. So we can single out different segues. So if it equals show detail, which this one does, and because it's switched into our detail view, it all works perfect. So if it does, we first need to kind of allocate our cell, then allocate our detail view and get the image from the cell and bring it over and place it in that variable we created in the detail view. So again, we create an additional one. So if our let variable, and we call this index path, is equal to self dot collection view, question mark there for our wrap, dot index path for cell. Now within it, we do a sender as exclamation mark our UI collection view cell. There we go. So if it equals that, which basically means when we select our cell, if it's equaling that it is a cell, and that's how we handle in data, which it will do, then it can perform what we want it to, which is then, like when we created our array to equal the cells at the bottom, we first had to allocate and kind of locate that collection view cell class to get the outlet from within it. We need to do the same now. So we create our let here and we call it our detail view. And all this is going to equal of our segue dot destination view controller, which is where it's going to go, as we need to again place an exclamation mark for the wrap, our detail view controller. It's because we're bringing the data and converting it all over. So by allocating our detail view controller, within it, we can now allocate the outlets that are in that class, such as the image view or the sent data. Now, we could equal the image view and bring the image over, but it will just cause some kind of confusion and it won't correctly do it. So what we need to do is place in and convert the string over into a variable of our sent data and then place that within our image view. Because it's dynamic, it can simply change every time. So what we need to do then is first we get our detail view, which is the name of our let just above here, and then we do dot sent data, as that's the variable being placed within that view, to equal our array, our lowercase array of our bracket index path dot row, and end that with a bracket. And then that gets rid of the error on our index path there, as we've now referenced it. So like I said before, we have to do it this way because we can't just simply select our image view and then place the data within it. We haven't really converted it and brought it over correctly to display it, which will then cause our application to crash. What we do then is, like how we got our array to display the images within our cells, we then get our array index.row, indexpath.row. So what that does, if we select the cell, it says, okay, so what cell did we select? Let's say we selected our second one. It goes, okay, so we selected our second cell, which then is our array, basically the second index path.row within our array, which is the second entry within our array, which for example would be our Audi, will then equal that to our sent data. Now, because our sent data is a string, it can't place the image within the string, obviously. So what it does, it takes the file name. That's how it takes it, the string of the image. So it places that within our sent data. So our sent data then equals ld1.jpg as a string. Then within our detail view controller.swift, within the viewDidLoad section, so when it first loads up, we then simply get our detail image.image to then equal a UI image, but the UI image we equal it to, named, rather than placing out, for example, Audi, blah, 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 we equal that to a string of our sent data, which you type in sent data and then end that with a bracket. So the sent data is always going to change and display a different string depending on what cell you select. So by doing it this way, every time the view loads up, it then gets our detail view and equals it to the string that's within our sent data. And again, if we selected our second cell, which is our Audi, the sent data is going to equal ld1.jpg, which when converted to display in our image view as a UI image, that's the actual file name and it displays it correctly. So if we go to build and run, and you can see exactly how it works and how it kind of displays that image within it. Okay, so let's pick one then. Let's say we're going to choose our Bugatti. We select it, and right as I take my finger off the enter button now, you can see it not only switches to our detail view, but in that split second, it places the string of that image cell into our sent data, then brings us over to the detail view and then gets our detail image and equals that to the sent data, which is the file name of our Bugatti, and then loads it up for us. There's a lot going on in that split second. Now, as we're in our detail view, there's no way of going back in terms of, let's say, the same way we do with an iPhone. It's not within a navigation controller, so we don't have any back button at the top. Now, if you're the first time you've done this and you're not sure how to go back, there's two ways to do it. If you're on the remote, you just simply press the menu button, because that's the correct way in how Apple wants you to navigate through applications within Apple TV. Or if you're just using the keyboard, just press escape and it also brings you back. So just to show you it is working, let's select the Lamborghini. You see, there we go. We got the Ferrari, the McLaren. You can see whatever cell we select, it brings that information over and displays it within it, which is perfect. That's what we want. So once we've dived deeper now into one of these cars, for example the Mercedes, we want to learn more about it. We want to know what type of car it is, and we want some stats on it. For example, how fast it can go, from 0 to 60, what's the brake horsepower, the miles per gallon, and how much it costs to buy. Now, all of these things, which it's quite a few things, about 4 or 5 things, or stats that we're going to want on the car, is going to change depending on what car. Now, we've brought the car over in an image view, so how can we bring this information that's non-existent yet also over and display it within these new objects? Well, we do this a lot differently. We do this and we kind of determine it down to what car is currently being displayed within the view. So before we get onto that, we're first going to configure our interface to display all this additional data. So back within our project, we're going to jump into our main.storyboard. And what we're going to do is now configure our detail view. So I'll just move this out of the way a second so we can add in a few labels. So this first label here is going to display what type, or basically what model the car is. For example, our Aston Martin is actually an Aston Martin Vanquish. So we want to display the full name, make and model of that car to our user. So what I'm going to quickly do then is change it up a bit. Let's put it to a custom kind of font there, make it a bit bolder, increase the size so we can clearly see it when we display it. There we go, it should be big enough. Center that text and then space that out. There we go. I'll then quickly copy and paste it in, as we're now going to need a few more. And I'll place these to the side of our image. Now what I'll do, I'll make sure that the font size is not as big and not as bold as well. So let's just go for a regular size there. Now we're going to need in total, we need the speed, 0 to 60, brake horsepower, miles per gallon and price, which is 5 labels in total. So let's select that and paste that in there. So that's 2, 4, and then finally 5. That's our 5th one there. Now center that to our image view and then make sure this is also centered to the rest of our objects. And we'll center it all together. There we go. So that's pretty much how our setup and our interface is going to look. So we've got all these in. We now need to configure what they're going to do. So obviously this one is going to be our car name. This one, we can use this one to display the top speed. So we can put in top speed and then whatever it is. This one we'll use it to basically do our 0 to 60. So we can do 0 to 60 in whatever speed we set. This one, next one can be our brake horsepower. So how much brake horsepower has the car got? And then what's left now? We have the price and we also have the miles per gallon. Now granted, these are going to be kind of fast sports cars and they're not going to be very economical, but it's also nice to have that additional stat. And then finally the price of the car. So there are the additional stats which are all going to change depending on what car is selected. So we need to create outlets for all of them. So select the files owner there and bring up the assistant editor. Now space it out there so we can clearly see. And quickly space out our outlet section here where we're going to start. So let's start with the car name. We're going to drag that over and simply call it car name. Create an outlet for that. We're then going to create our top speed, our 0 to 60, our brake horsepower, miles per gallon, and then finally the price of the car. So we'll just call it price. There we go. We've got those 6 outlets all set up now, which again, like I've said before, are all going to change and be very dynamic to what car is being displayed. So I kind of touched on before, how do we get the information to display within it? It's because we bring the image over for the image view. So how do we bring this information over, which we don't really have yet? Well, we kind of don't do it like that. We don't really want it to do it like that. If we jump into our Uiviewcontroller, what we want to do is when we bring over, for example, let's say the Aston Martin, once that gets displayed, we then want to say, okay, so if that image view is displaying Aston Martin, then configure all the labels to the Aston Martin stats. Else, if that image view is displaying the Audi, then display all the Audi stats. And we're going to configure this within our view did load. So when the view loads up and it displays that image view within it from our sent data, we're then going to create an if statement. So if our detail image view there dot image is equal to our UI image bracket named, and then we place in the string. So if it equals, let's start with our first one, aston.jpg, then perform what we place within these brackets. And what we want it to do is get our car name dot text to simply equal a string. Now if I quickly copy what I've got there and paste it in, so we've got the remainder of all the other labels there, and change it all up. So this to our top speed, this one to our 0 to 60, this one's our brake horsepower, our miles per gallon, and then finally our price. There we go. So it's only going to change those labels if and only if our detail image view equals an image with the string or the file name of aston.jpg. Now if I quickly go to build and run, you can see this slightly working. Because, and only because, within our main.storyboard, I currently have all the labels set by default to say car name, top speed, blah, 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 blah. So if I selected anything but the Aston Martin, for example, if I selected the Lamborghini, you can see it says car name, top speed, and so on, because I haven't configured anything for it. But if I selected the Aston Martin, you can see all the labels are now blank. And you may be thinking, well, why? And that's because within our view did load here, because it equaled the Aston Martin image, I set all the labels to have nothing within it. So you can kind of see how that's working. So this does mean we have to create an if statement for all of our cars. So to make it a bit easy, if we do 3/0, we can kind of comment the code. And this is our Aston Martin. So if I quickly copy this, and we need 8 altogether. So 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Now it is quite a lot to kind of take in at once and see on the screen, but by commenting the code you can easily separate each of the cars. So we're going to change this all up now. So this is our Audi, and also we change this as well, our Audi. Our next one is our BMW, and again we make sure we change that up for our BMW. And then this one is our Bugatti. Quickly copy that name there, paste it in. Bugatti. And then what we're up to now, we've got a Bugatti. We also have in our Ferrari. Again, making sure I spelled this right. Ferrari. There we go there. And then our Lamborghini there. Again, it's always the Lamborghini and the Ferrari I always struggle to spell. I'm not too sure why. I manage to always spell them differently every time, and I add in words that I didn't know should even exist with the word Lamborghini. So all that's left now is McLaren. Add that in. And then finally, the last one, the Mercedes. There we go. Add that in. So again, it can look quite daunting, the matter of fact that we got all these if statements in, but they're quite easy to understand. We've made sure that we've commented each one, and if it makes it a little bit easier, we can separate, put like a little space between each if statement there. We separated them with comments there and separate each one, and you can kind of then see it doesn't really affect the code. You can kind of see then if it equals Mercedes, then they're the stats for Mercedes, they're the stats for McLaren, they're for Lamborghini, and so on and so on. So just to double check that it's all working, we're going to quickly select each cell in our collection view now, and all the labels should be blank. Now, if one of them is not blank, and that's down to the fact that I may have misspelled the actual file name that it's equaling. And if they're all blank, then we know that it's able to read all of the if statements, which it can, which is brilliant. That's what we want. So what I'm going to do now then is then place out everything we need. So this one, our first one, is our Audi. You see now our R8. The top speed of it is, now I have written down in front of me kind of some stats for all these cars. They may not be 100% correct, as I did get these off the internet, and the internet is not always the best source for all the details and facts. So it's rough. It's a rough estimate. So miles per hour, top speed 205 miles per hour, which is crazy. 0 to 60 in this happens to be 2.7 seconds. The brake horsepower on the Audi R8 is 610, which again seems crazy. And then the miles per gallon, which is the probably only stat that's going to make these cars look terrible, is 18. That's not good. And finally, the price for this car is in dollars, 164, so $164,000. Now, I'm not going to sit here and let you guys watch me type in every stat for all these cars. I will quickly pause the video in just a moment, fill out the rest, and then you guys can see all the stats. You can pause the video then to see all the stats and configure them yourselves. It's entirely up to you, but I'd rather not let you watch me write out all these stats because it is quite boring. But we're going to see how this looks now. So it's only which I've just realized I've placed all this in within the Aston Martin. So we'll quickly copy paste that there. There are the Audi stats, and paste them there. So when we build and run now, that's my mistake there. I was reading the wrong stats for the wrong car. We got the Audi all set up. So it's only when we select the Audi that the Audi is going to have all the stats. But then you can kind of see how it works. So again, for the Aston Martin, there's nothing there because we have it all set to blank. But when we select the Audi R8, you can see the title then says Audi R8. Top speed, 205, 0 to 60, 2.7. Brake horsepower, 610. Miles per gallon, 18. And then the price, $164,000. So this is very dynamic. It only equals that if the image view equals the Audi R8. And I'm now going to fill in the rest of all the stats now. So what I do, allow you to see all of them. You can pause the screen if you want to catch up and place in all those stats, just to then show you how it changes dynamically. I just don't want you to sit there and watch me place in all the stats. So then, here I go. Okay then, so I've placed in all the stats, and again, they're not going to be perfectly accurate, as I did get them online. So for those motorheads out there that know the correct stats, correct me if I am wrong. But if you want to pause the video at any point now to catch up on any of these stats, it is quite a few to add in, as you can see now, but I've placed them all in all the way down to Mercedes. So pause the video if you want to catch up on any of those stats. But now we're going to go to build and run to see how they dynamically change. Now again, how it all works is off what the image view is displaying. So for example, if I selected the Aston Martin, because the Aston Martin, it equals that image, then only reads that one if statement to display the Aston Martin Vanquish stats. As you can see there, for the BMW i8, you can see there's a lot different. The Bugatti Veyron, again, that's ridiculous amount of stats, and the price tag, which is ridiculous in its own right. But all the stats, all the labels are all dynamic depending on what cell we selected, which again determines on what image gets brought over and gets displayed within our detail image. So there we go, then you can see exactly how it all changes. The label at the top changes, tells us what car it is, which then kind of begs the question where we can take this application as a step forward. It just doesn't limit it to this kind of topic as in cars. It could be aeroplanes, it could be motorbikes, you could even do dogs, cats, just different stuff, having the front page of the gallery, using that and the images as different topics, selecting it and then learning more about that object. And there we have it. Our application now populates all the objects in our detail view dynamically to whatever car or cell we select within our image gallery on the collection view. Now, if you'd like to learn tvOS and Apple TV application development in greater detail, why not check out our full featured course? Links for this will be down below. But until then, in part 3, we're going to take a look at creating a mini image gallery within our detail view. What this is going to do is basically allow us to see more images of the car that we selected. And again, this will change also dynamically, just like the labels do with the stats. So until then, I'll see you all in part 3. So see you soon.